Right. So making yourself just comfortable in the chair. Start forwards in the chair, knowing that you may want to sit back to get more support for your back at some point and so on. And just uh, picking up the theme I was just saying, just get a sense for how you're being supported. And obviously your chair is supporting you, the floor is supporting you. So that means that in the seated posture, feet, legs and hips are all very much sort of the connection, if you like. And we sometimes use the face sitting into the hips. So in the same way that you settle into the chair, have a sense of settling in to your hips. Try and feel that your back is supporting the front of your upper body. But a different perspective that's complementary is to feel that your skeleton is in line and able to support the soft tissue of your body. Neither of these are black and white, by the way, but both of them would emphasize the significance of feet, legs, hips, and so on and so forth. Feet directly below your knees, slightly angled forwards, about a third of your weight in your feet. It's a very subtle distinction to me. Just rubbing your hands together and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And the other side. Upper part of the chest. And your belly. Last is back on and your legs. Okay, so sit back in the chair. Now with this posture, what we can start to get is a sense of the feelings in our body. And as we become more aware of what it's like to sort of like really relax into a chair, for instance, and we notice certain features, maybe breathing, maybe the effect on chest and so on and so forth. And these two are things that we can start to take into the upright postures, both seated and standing. And when I talk about intent, we intend something, a movement or a posture or something like that. We want our intent to sort of be broad enough to embrace both the physical aspect of the posture, but also the sense of how it feels, that starts to become a guide. One thing to be very aware of is that we're trying to sink into the chair, and points of contact with the chair, so tops of the legs, buttocks, hips, that kind of area, and then somewhere around about the middle of your back, or it depends exactly how you're fitting into the chair, of course. These are the areas to begin to try and encourage that feeling of release. And I've talked about this before. If you hold a fist tight, you feel the tension going all the way up your body. It's really uncomfortable. If you loosen your fingers, so you could almost look through, like looking through a telescope, you still have the structure, you still have the fist, but without the same kind of gripping. So the change from that tightness to the more open state is the change that you're looking for in muscles and soft tissue in those areas of contact with the chair. So when we come back to the upright posture, finding the position in the chair, if you need that little bit of extra support for the lower part of your back, you can move back. More difficult if you're further back to feel the weight in your feet. One little test you can make with this is just, you know, as you sit here, how easy is it to lift up both feet? You know, what you want to be able to do is to get the feeling that you could just lift up with a minimum of strain in your back Whereas if I'm sitting wrong or whatever, I have to sort of strain in the upper part of my body. The other one we can do, of course, is a heel raise that we do raise that. I would describe the overall feel of the posture as being spacious. It's an image that I quite like. That I feel that there's space within the body with this release of tightness, like putting on an old pair of shoes after you've been for walking in a new pair. You know, it's not that the new pair don't fit, but there's just, you can move your toes around and a little bit and so on. And when we start to move, we want to really maintain that space. So in the back of your mind, this feeling is a consistent. It's like the background of a painting or something like that. It's not necessarily what you're directly looking at. There could be a subject that's there, but you know, imagine what it would be like if you took a painting and you could somehow erase the background. The foreground would look different and would feel different. So significant part of your attention grounding into this posture, settling into this posture as you start to turn your head. And just notice if in the process of turning it affects the background, or notice if suddenly your attention has lost that awareness of the background. And that's very common, by the way. I think that happens to all of us. So we begin to establish moments when we return to the background. And not so much with this exercise, but with most of them, there's generally a kind of two stages, an expanding or opening stage, a contracting or a closing stage. And in between the two, that's when we get that little kind of punctuation mark, like the comma in a full sentence. And that's the moment that we just are aware of the background. You don't have to sort of think about it too much. You don't have to analyze it. Just notice it. And after a while, you find that the act of noticing also brings about sometimes some kind of correction. So here, for instance, when we start with our elbows down, push your elbows forwards, and just for a moment, feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders before you push your elbows forwards again. Yeah, little punctuation mark, little comma. And do this from the side. Again, my elbows drop straight down. It might be tempting to do something like this, but give yourself time and space to do this. And a great deal of this art is really concerned with giving ourselves that sense of space, not only in our body, but in terms of just our minds, not rushing into the next movement. And then changing, going forwards. So these are things that we want to become habitual to. When they do that, then the transition will be to the standing. So as you do this, can you still feel your weight in your hips? Maybe in your feet as well, for instance. Can you feel the support of the skeleton from within? And so on and so forth. Hands down to your sides, and then rotating your arms. And you say, really, it's possible to define 3 stages, if you like, to any particular movement, well, 6 stages, I suppose, but to any particular part. So as I turn, I rotate my arms here. As they come back, it's another stage. And so here, I start off, and it starts off with a bit of a kind of surge of movement. And then it just smooths along like a river flowing. Then as it reaches the limit of the movement, it slows down again. And that limit is when certain parts of the body, certain muscles and tissues have reached a point of extension where we don't want to go any further. Remember, we're not trying to tighten them. And we just settle in. You maybe think about your hips. and you feel the surge starting again. Same thing here. Now, you may not be able to feel that all the time, but again, it's the way of bringing your attention back. Winding around. Some movements, I think, lend themselves to that awareness better than others. But wherever you notice it, focus on that, and you'll find that it does, that thing about the 3 stages, if that appeals, they'll crop up in other movements. And then back the other way. Resting your hands, and then tilting forwards, and just give yourself a moment to get a feeling of your weight dropping into your feet, and then feel that push, that surge as I described it, pushing you back. And at the end of the movement, settle into your hips, and then waiting for the surge again and going forwards. So when I talk about settling in, dropping your weight, settling your weight in your feet or your hips, that's also the moment where we might bring in that idea of releasing. Notice that maybe going back here, suddenly you push yourself up, your lower back's tight. We release in the lower back and hips, and you sink down, and then we go forwards. So what we can often do is think, well, I've got to go forwards, got to go back, got to go forwards, got to go back. But actually, that's only half the story. There's a hidden element, one that you can feel but can't particularly see, which is that moment of settling in each part of the body that's receiving the weight, whether it's in this instance our feet versus our hips, or whether in standing it's maybe in parallel stance, sinking down, just being prepared to wait there for a moment, or transferring the weight, waiting there for a moment. I'll come back to that when we come to stand. Turn slightly. Summed up in Tai Chi classic writings by the phrase, being still as a mountain, moving like a great river. And you'll notice that it isn't be still as a mountain or move like a great river, and then move like a great river. There's an assumption in there that this quieting, this settling period, that definitely helps to generate this sense of stillness, are a vital part of the whole process, albeit quite a quick part in turn slightly and then go in the other direction. We can learn to distinguish between full and empty. When you feel the weight going into one leg, it becomes the full leg. When you go back, it's hips and lower back that fill up. Then you go forwards to the leg again and back. And so now what we want to do is to feel that those feelings, those qualities move. So from the leg, we can swing across to the opposite leg, let your hips drop back to the hip on that side, and then the hip on the other side, and so on and so forth. So we can go quite deeply into these very, very, very simple movements. And in the process of doing that, we're training ourselves to be aware of how these things come through in a more complex movement. We're back the other way. And just remind yourself that given a chance, your body's strong enough to support it. Back in the central position, and then stepping forwards and back, measuring the step, so that here you want to feel as though you could push down into the floor a little bit. Notice that the rest of your body is really concerned with supporting you. feel your hips sinking into the chair, and then on the other side. So we gradually develop what we could almost say is a two-part awareness, or rather we gradually make use of a two-part awareness that most of us have already experienced in one way or another. The background part that we're not actively sort of like thinking of, if you like, all the things that I've been talking about, and we're aware of that in the way that if you drive a car or ride a bike, you might well be aware of the sound of the car, the feeling of the bike underneath you, and so on and so forth. But you're not constantly thinking. You're not riding along, going, right, now I've got to push the left foot down. Now I've got to push the right foot down. Now I've got to put the left, and this is happening with my hips. It just becomes quite intuitive. And I think this is where the different postures, the different movements are quite interesting, because it's quite challenging to maintain that. And this is good practice to do this. So bird folds its wings. And then from the forward position, fisherman cast the net. And then nudging the ball underneath your arms, sit back, have your hips sinking down, pulling the ball, rolling the ball in towards you. So from here, sort of imagine it's quite a heavy ball. You can't just do this. It's like just sitting back, pulling. Yeah, I'm exaggerating this now. Right back, which I wouldn't normally do. Yeah, I push my feet down into the floor. So we're beginning to appreciate with this how important our feet are. And it sounds silly to say, doesn't it? But we're in a chair. It's very easy to forget about the feet. Feel that sense of compression down through into the soles of your feet. And then what you want to feel is, if you were doing this on soft sand, when you went forwards, the feet would get pushed further and further down. And that's an interesting feeling, one that you might find yourself resistant to. Now, pigeon spreads its wings. So as you go forwards, and you feel your feet being pushed into the floor, again, ask yourself, what is supporting you at this point? Is it a tightening, a stiffening in your muscles? Are you tightening your knee? Or are you able to just soften that tightening and feel that build up of pressure in the soles of your feet? Next time coming back into pushing wave, and now just concentrate on sinking down into your hips and then feeling the push back up. Again, if I exaggerate, and this really is an exaggeration, but to show you the sort of thing that I'm feeling, I sink into my hip, I let my whole body sink down. Now, I wouldn't normally let it bend like this, but it's the only way I can sort of display it. It's like that sitting in. It's almost like, again, don't do this. I've done this, and then as I come back, I go to sit down and I sink into the chair. Notice how my hands will come back there. That's quite a strong exercise. I wouldn't recommend going straight into that. And again, there's this pausing, this comma. So remember these little qualities, these little details, the comma, the small movements, the small changes in our body are very much the building blocks, the bricks and mortar of the whole system. And they're also the ones where we're most likely to be able to bring about some kind of useful change through this overlapping of mind and body. And a really key thing is to notice the huge significance of the lower part of your body, hips, legs, feet. And then hands loosely fisted. Turning your hands out. Very challenging, I think, to maintain that awareness of what's happening in the lower part of your body when we're doing chair-based exercises. And I think this is great because I think what it does is we have to actively choose, oh yeah, hips, feet, legs, and so on and so forth, really the whole time. But in practice, we're not going to do that. That would interrupt everything. But here, with my weight forwards, it's feet, legs, hips. Here, it's feet, legs, hips, and so on and so forth, until that just becomes a kind of standard check, if you like, that is made subconsciously. Pushing the table, turning your hands palm down, turning in the middle of your body, turn back in the middle of your body. Your arms following your shoulders, the shoulders following your hips, and the turn in your center. One more time in each direction. Now, don't go straight into the next set of exercises, but just rest your hand and then imagine you're going to stand up. So again, I'll show you. I'm not saying that you have to do this. If I stand up without using my arms at all, what I would do is I'll bring my weight forwards here, like this, and almost like I'm going to roll out the chair. Well, I don't want to do that. So I do a push from my hip, I push my weight forward, and I do this. And then I push down through my feet. Now, if I do that very small, there's a barely noticeable push from my hips and a barely noticeable push from my feet. This is what we've just been doing. You can see my head and shoulders moving. But what about if I push my feet and my hips at the same time? The two movements externally would neutralize each other, because as soon as my shoulders started to go forward, the push from my feet would push me back. So instead of going forwards or backwards, I would end up doing this, going up. So that provides that upward energy, but crucially, and again, this is a key principle. The upward movement grows out of the downward movement and is initiated by the downward movement. So when we bring our hands to here and we want to lift our hands, we want a sense of movement, of energy coming up and underneath our hand. We don't just want to work the shoulders. And so there's that little bit of pressure increase in feet and hips, and then the movement upwards. And then releasing that to the downward movement. So that feels a bit awkward to start off with in the chair. But again, remember, we're establishing a principle. And it's often said in Tai Chi that there is always what is referred to as the opposite movement, or the counterbalancing movement. If there's an up, there has to be a down. Forward requires backwards, and so on and so forth. These are ideas that have resonated through Chinese Taoist thinking for a couple of millennia. But this is a very practical application of that. We want to get to a point where whatever the movement we're doing, there's always this sense of an initiating movement. I won't even call it a counterbalancing movement, because that implies that it comes second, but it's actually the first movement. Recognize that one of the things that you're doing is that you're actively firing certain neural pathways. The language of neuroscience can be quite interesting. Neuroscientists talk about neural pathways, certain combinations of nerve cells lighting up. So when we make a particular movement, or even when we have a particular thought or feeling or emotion, most of those things will have some kind of impact on the nervous system. They've done ECG tests on people's brains, and they've kind of compared the patterns in between people who spend a lot of time meditating on qualities like compassion, for instance. And the brain pattern can be different. The neural pathways can be different. And another phrase that is used in neuroscience is that neurons, the nerve cells, those pathways that fire together, wire together. So every time you light up a particular neural pathway, you're essentially moving towards increasing its effectiveness. Just as when you use your body to do a particular movement, you're having an effect on muscles and tendons and ligaments and so on. And then change into the wild goose. But again, these are all things that will stay with you when you move to standing exercises. So this is where I think the the seated exercises are really interesting because actually we have to work that much harder to feel these connections in our body from feet to hands because it's very, very easy to lose that awareness of your feet. Have you ever sat down in a chair, maybe read a book or watched something on television or something like that, then suddenly you think, oh, you know, the doorbell rings, you go to stand up, and you realize that your leg has gone numb because it hasn't been used for a while. We just forget about our legs. So by actively reminding ourselves to bring our attention to certain parts of the body, we're activating those neural pathways, we're firing them. And when they fire together, they wire together. Heart in the clouds. Remember also the transmission of the movement through your skeleton. Not only does it support, but we could imagine like the movement coming up through bones of our legs into our hips and our pelvis, from there up through the spine into the shoulders, and here through the bones of arms and hands and fingers. So one of the elements of the body very important for support is also very much linked in with movement, the flow of energy. And change into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. This is why we put so much attention on training our awareness of what's happening within our body. You may also notice the opposite. You know, with this one, perhaps you're starting the upward movement with this lift of the shoulder. And so gradually we identify those elements of the movement that are useful compared to those that aren't useful. Because if I do this, now my whole body's being thrown out of line. Dragon plucks the stars. One more time on each side. And then changing. So really that process that I've been describing in feet, legs, hips is constant. Again, this becomes part of that background. We're aware of what it's like to sit into our hips, how it feels in our body when we're supporting. Now just beginning to realize that there's a connection between how we're supported and how we're moving. So in theory, and it's very hard to bring this into practice, the act of moving shouldn't remove that support from us. It may change it slightly, but not remove it. Changing now to scooping the sea and looking at the sky. When one part of your body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Your whole body is engaged in the movement. And then hands twisted, grasping the tiger's ear. Rooted in the feet, transmitted through our legs, directed through the center of the body, expressed in our arms is a phrase from the Tai Chi classics. Change sides. Notice as you do this leg is still supporting you. The leg that's flat on the floor, the foot that's flat on the floor. When you go forwards, can you feel that your spine and your ribs are supporting the shape of your upper body? Going from the side, it's here, yeah. Obviously, it's not necessarily a position I'm going to hold for very long. At the same time, here, there's just a little bit more pressure in that heel. I feel as though, oh yeah, that's stopping me going forwards anymore. And then grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. Part of the wild horse's mane. I keep coming back to this as an exercise. It's quite challenging because it's a little bit more complex than some of the other exercises. The weight drops back into your right side, your right hip, holding the ball, going forwards and feeling that sense of dropping into this leg, into your left leg. Give yourself a moment there and then feel the push back into your right hip. Settle there for a moment, move across, settle down. That settling down as you go forwards now leads to the outward movement. It is also a moment of settling of your center of gravity, a point where you might just sort of briefly consider your posture and so on and so forth. It is also, quite honestly, the emergency process. You know, those moments when you feel wobbly, particularly in standing, of course, this is what you want to try and reproduce. That's quite a tall order to have to be aware of that within this quite complex movement. And that's quite deliberate. Because you'll find it will really enhance the movement and will change your experience of the movement. But more to the point, you know, those moments when, you know, I don't know, you're doing the washing up or you're reaching for something on the shelf or you're just sort of, you know, you're in a bit of a hurry to open the door. You know, your mind is elsewhere. But if you've hardwired these essential principles, your surface thoughts may well be elsewhere, but you train your body, your mind, and the intermediary of brain and nervous system, and other things as well. But let's keep it relatively simple to behave themselves, shall we say? One more of these on each side. And then Rest your hand. And again, give yourself a few moments to settle in again, to sit into your chair, into your hips and feet, kind of into your skeleton. Remember how it felt when we sat back in the chair. Rubbing your hands together again. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. And your belly. And your legs. Pushing your heels up. And circling. And then back the other way. Okay. And just notice, is a part of you already sort of starting to stand up? You're all familiar with what, you know, we're going to stand up now. Can you just take a moment to settle down and then stand up? And having stood up, can you take a moment just to settle down again? So that this becomes a habit. It's a very good meditation. It's a very good way of stilling the mind, but recognize that it's quite natural for us all to speed up when we're approaching something very difficult. It's an adrenaline reaction, but not always useful. Give yourself a moment in the standing posture to again consider it. Sit into the hips and have your hand on something supportive, because some of that process is a matter of simply relaxing, and that's going to be quite difficult if you're feeling a bit uncertain in the standing. You'll gain more confidence when you're able to spot those moments when you are able to, oh, just there, just there, just there. It comes and it goes, but the fact that it's coming is a very positive thing. And sinking down, hands in front of you, pushing up, dropping down, giving yourself a moment in the lower position. And as you do that, I'm going to move back, turn your hands out, going into the wild goose, and sink. Settle for a moment, let your hands drop down, and then pushing up into parting the clouds. You won't get that feeling of settling every time. It'd be nice if we did, but it's still very difficult. This is the stillness within the movement. It's not an either or. And then shake out. All forwards. And again, you know, I can just have my hand reassured on the wall, beginning to move my weight that's a fairly obvious thing, still very tricky, but in also giving myself that time mentally as well as physically to really feel that settling in. Again, it's not going to happen every time, but actually that can be quite useful. So for instance, if I go to here and I'm like, oh, I'm a bit wobbly. I've got the wall for support. I'm okay. But so what can I do about this? Can I, oh, you know, if I let my hips drop, for instance, I can maybe come back into that awareness of inner structure and inner support. And I would also argue, if you can do so safely, you know, deliberately put yourself offline, just in your own time. They go, well, actually, oh, now I'm a bit wobbly. So you know, if I'm a bit wobbly, what do I do? Well, first of all, I make sure that I'm not going to fall. I'm still a bit wobbly. Can I drop my hips? And oh, that works. So this is a matter of rebuilding confidence in our body. It's very easy to lose that confidence. Remember, you're supported by your feet, your legs. You're supported by the skeleton. And then we can begin to just raise our toes and our heel. At this point, you may well find that muscles of your legs in particular are really starting to ache. But it can happen very, very quickly. But remember that actually, you know, when we talk about the application of these ideas, you know, there's moments in the kitchen or when we're walking down the road where it gets a bit wobbly. We're only talking about this for a moment. I mean, it's good if you can practice this for the reasons that I've been stating, as well as the building of your muscles and so on and so forth. Because if you can start to feel it, say walking down the road, then you've already got it. But those moments when you do feel a bit uncertain, it doesn't have to look good. It doesn't have to be perfect posture. Just, oh, suddenly I'm upright. Just stepping in. But that hard wiring to take place. I mean, think about anything that you've done. If you've ever learned to play a musical instrument, to ride a bike, to drive a car, to thread a needle, to do so many of the things that we naturally do, tying shoelaces. I can remember as a child being nearly in tears because I couldn't tie my shoelaces. These days, I don't have to think about it because you just keep doing it over and over again, learning by rote, learning by repetition, because we know that that has that direct physical effect on our body in various ways, over and over again. So it really does require a daily practice. Raising your toes and your heel. In that moment as you settle in, just a very quick awareness check of your posture, noticing what's throwing your posture out, and not necessarily feeling that you have to actively deal with it right now, just aware of that. Stepping in, very much aware of the supporting leg. Step through. This is a walking meditation. And then back the other way. Good, and shake out. It's not a race. In fact, it's the opposite. If it was a race, then the last one to finish would get the prize. And that's very difficult, very, very difficult to do that slowly. Now, have your right foot forward. Just do a few rounds of fisherman cast the net. Now, this is also quite interesting. I can get to here and I'm fine. As soon as I go to here, I'm now being drawn forward, you can see. So what we add to what I've already been talking about is an awareness of what happens when we bring our arms into the movement. And then your arms swing up. Again, not too high. And on the other side. And turn in. Using the circular movement. Turn the front foot out a little bit. Now, take it in stages. Go forwards to here. Raise your back heel. Turn a little bit more. Bring your foot in as you lift your arms up. Settle down and then step. You can break it right down. And yes, you may want to lift your knee. I know it was a bit wobbly there when I did that. Or you may just keep your toes on the ground. It doesn't really mean that much to raise your raise your leg. The important thing is that here, just for a moment, where here, watch my hips. I sink before I do anything else. Same thing here. I sink, and then I go back. So it becomes habitual each time you settle your weight in the foot, and especially if you're moving the other foot, look for that sink in and the alignment that allows it. Just naturally as you would take a breath in, followed by a breath out. Good. And then give your legs a shake. Go back to your chair. So mind and body very much working together. And of course, brain and nervous system are going to be really crucial intermediaries, or really a crucial part of that connection. There's other things as well, perhaps, but I'll stick with that. And so a really important part of the practice, one that I think is enhanced by the chair-based exercises, is to understand and to realize and to work with that connection. And when I talk about our body, the primary focus of attention, feet and hips and so on. Now just let your hands drop down. So embrace tiger, return to mountain. Your arms push out. They come around. Now it's at this point that you want to feel your hips sinking into the chair, drawing your hands in, and that settling in process in mind and body. This is the feeling you would want to get in those moments of wobbling when we're standing. So, you know, how does it feel to you? It's not my description that's important, it's your experience of it and how you've labeled that becomes really crucial at this point. One of the reasons that we always finish with this particular exercise. One more time. Your hands come to rest. Feel the weight of your arms and your shoulders. Feel that little bit of weight in your feet. The majority of your weight passing down through your chest, by your hips and buttocks. Your back supporting the front of your body. Your whole body supported through that medium of the inner structure, the skeleton, and surrounding the tissues and associated ligaments and muscles. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths in this position. And then just open your eyes. And that went very, very quickly for me. This will be up on YouTube later, so you can always check out that stuff again. Sometimes it might even be useful to write things down, just to reinforce some of the points. I was doing that the other day with a particular video, and in the end, I just thought I'm going to make a list of what they're saying and what I'm thinking at this point. Otherwise, by the end of the video, I'm going to have forgotten it all. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So enjoy the rest of the day. I don't know what the weather's going to do to us.